My name is Anna, and for most of my life I thought I understood what stability looked like. I had the house that looked perfect from the outside, the husband everyone envied, and a circle of friends who felt like family. It was a life that seemed solid, until the night a single unlocked door shattered the illusion. Mark, my husband, was the kind of man people trusted instantly. He was steady, dependable, a quiet presence in every room. After 12 years of marriage, I knew his habits as well as my own. The way he rubbed his temples when he was tired, the faint whistle under his breath when he worked late into the night. Ours was not a marriage built on passion anymore. It had cooled into something quieter, predictable, and, if I am honest, a little distant. But I had convinced myself that comfort was enough. Claire was different. She was my opposite in nearly every way. Where I second-guessed myself, she leapt forward. Where I kept my thoughts neatly tucked away, she spoke hers freely, often too freely. Yet, somehow, our differences stitched us together into a friendship that lasted for years. She was the one I called when I needed to vent about Mark, the one who sat at my kitchen table on Sunday mornings laughing over nothing. In many ways, she felt more like family than a friend. That evening should have been ordinary. We had hosted one of our small gatherings. Nothing extravagant, just laughter over wine and the usual hum of conversation. When the last guest left, the house was littered with half-empty glasses and the faint smell of roasted garlic. Mark excused himself early, mumbling about work exhaustion, and headed upstairs. I thought nothing of it. Lately, he had been retreating more often. Claire stayed behind to help me tidy the kitchen. She teased me for overfilling everyone's glasses and told me stories that made the chore feel lighter. When the counters gleamed again, I offered her the guest room, as I had done countless times before. She accepted with a smile that felt familiar, reassuring. I believed everything was as it always had been, but hours later, as I climbed the stairs, the house unnervingly quiet, I noticed the detail that unsettled me. The guest room door was not locked. Claire always locked it, always. She had once joked that she felt safer that way, like she could finally switch off and rest. Yet that night, the handle gave under my hand, the door cracked open just enough to betray her routine. It was such a small thing, almost insignificant. But it tugged at me, pulled me closer. I hesitated, torn between respect and the gnawing suspicion that something waited on the other side. In the end, I didn't knock. The moment my hand brushed that open door, a disquieting weight settled in my chest. At first I told myself it was nothing. Perhaps she had simply forgotten. But Claire was not forgetful. She was deliberate, even in the smallest things. The unlocked door was not an accident. I lingered there, caught between the impulse to retreat and the urge to confirm what my gut already whispered. My ears strained against the silence until it wasn't silence at all. A murmur, low and indistinct, drifted out. A laugh, soft, almost playful, threaded its way into the hall. I froze. The sound was familiar, painfully so. Mark's voice. The realization struck me with the force of a blow. He should have been asleep in our room down the hall. But his voice was here, in Claire's room. My breath shallowed, every muscle in my body taut with disbelief. Against reason, I inched the door open wider. What I saw was not yet damning, but it was enough to unravel me. They were seated close, far closer than friends should be. Mark's hand lingered on her arm, his posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not with me. Claire leaned in, her expression soft, attentive, as though she were sharing something precious with him. It wasn't what they were doing. It was what it meant. The intimacy in their proximity, the quiet comfort between them. It was the kind that blooms in secrecy. For a moment, I wanted to shut the door, to erase the sight before it rooted itself in my memory. But Claire turned first, her eyes meeting mine. Guilt flickered across her face like a shadow, swift and undeniable. Mark followed her gaze. His expression collapsed, a mixture of horror and defeat. He didn't leap away, didn't scramble for excuses. He just sat there, as though the energy to lie had already drained from him. "Anna," he began, but the word hung uselessly in the air. My pulse hammered, each beat echoing with betrayal. "Why? The single word escaped before I could contain it, sharp and trembling. Claire rose quickly, wrapping herself in a robe, her voice fragile. It isn't what you think, but the lie tasted sour before it even left her lips. I looked from one to the other, my husband, my closest friend, and felt the ground tilt beneath me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a truth they had both chosen, a truth that now stood bare in the dim light of that unlocked room. And yet, I couldn't move. My body, my voice, my entire being was suspended in that instant, teetering between the life I thought I had and the reality unraveling before me. The door, once a barrier, now stood wide open, and with it, so did everything I had tried not to see. The air in the room thickened, every second stretching unbearably. My voice, when it finally emerged, was steadier than I expected. How long? Neither of them answered immediately. The silence itself was an answer, sharp enough to cut. Mark looked down, his hands clenched in his lap, while Claire twisted the belt of her robe as if it might tether her to the ground. "A few months," Mark said at last, his voice hoarse. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward, disturbing everything I thought I knew. A few months. While I cooked dinners, folded laundry, and laughed with Claire across the table, they had been carrying a secret between them. My stomach churned, a physical revolt against the truth. I stared at them both, trying to reconcile the faces I knew with the betrayal they now wore openly. And I was supposed to never find out? Claire stepped forward, her eyes glistening. "It wasn't planned, Anna. We never meant—" "Don't," I snapped, the word laced with all the fury I had tried to contain. "Don't soften it with excuses. You had choices. Every day you had a choice. And every time you chose this." Her face crumpled, but I could not summon sympathy. My gaze shifted to Mark. "And you?" He finally looked at me, his eyes heavy with something between shame and resignation. "I felt unseen. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. And with Claire it was easy. Easy." The word twisted inside me, cruel in its simplicity. Love, it seemed, had become a matter of convenience to him. "You think I wasn't lonely too?" My voice broke, but I didn't care. "You think I didn't notice the distance growing between us? The silence at dinner? The way you looked at your phone more than me? But I stayed. I fought for us. And you—" I gestured toward Claire, the woman who had held my secrets. "You threw us away for easy." Mark's lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't deepen the wound. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed so heavily on me that I felt I might collapse. Yet beneath the pain, a clarity began to form. The betrayal wasn't a single moment behind a door left unlocked. It was months of deception, a slow erosion of trust carried out in shadows. I realized then that the life I thought I had been living was gone. The door wasn't just open, it could never be closed again, and though neither of them said it aloud, the silence told me everything. What we had could not be salvaged. The hours that followed passed in fragments, like shards of a mirror too jagged to piece together. I remember pacing the room, my steps uneven, my breath ragged. I remember Mark trying to reach for me, his hand hovering in the air before retreating, as though even he knew his touch was no longer welcome. And I remember Claire sitting silently, her face pale, her robe pulled tight, as if fabric alone could shield her from what she had done. The arguments blurred together. Questions demanded, answers muttered, none of them enough to fill the cavern that had opened inside me. What broke me most was not the betrayal itself, but its duration. The thought of how many dinners we'd shared, how many jokes we'd laughed at, while their secret burned quietly between them. At some point, I told Claire to leave. My voice was calm, almost too calm, but the finality in it left no space for protest. She gathered her things with trembling hands, her eyes avoiding mine, and slipped out the front door. No apology could follow her. No explanation could undo what had already been carved into my memory. That left Mark and me, standing in the ruins of what once passed for a marriage. He tried in halting words to explain, to plead for another chance. He promised therapy, swore he would end it completely, begged me to believe that our years together meant more than this betrayal. But as I looked at him, I realized something quietly devastating. I no longer recognized the man I had promised my life to. Or maybe, I thought bitterly, I never fully had. The house, once a refuge, now felt foreign, tainted by secrets I could never unknow. Every room seemed to whisper reminders. The hallway where I had first kissed him, the kitchen where Claire and I had shared confidences, the guest room door left recklessly unlocked. I told him I needed space, though what I really needed was distance, the kind that could not be measured in rooms or walls but in miles of silence between us. He nodded, perhaps understanding, perhaps only afraid to press further. In the quiet that followed, I sat alone, the weight of everything pressing down. And yet, beneath the grief, a strange clarity began to emerge. I realized that this night, as shattering as it was, had given me something I hadn't felt in years: certainty. Certainty that love cannot survive in secrecy. Certainty that friendship cannot coexist with betrayal. Certainty that the life I had clung to so tightly was already gone. And as the first light of morning filtered through the curtains, I whispered to myself the truth I had been too afraid to face. Sometimes doors remain unlocked because we are meant to walk through them, no matter how painful what waits on the other side. In the weeks that followed, I found myself moving through life as if through water, everything slower, heavier, muted. The routines remained the same: the alarm clocks chime, the kettles whistle, the hum of traffic outside my window. But I was different. The world around me hadn't changed, yet my place within it no longer fit. Mark stayed in the house, at least for a while. We lived like uneasy strangers, circling one another with polite words and carefully measured silences. He tried, in small ways, to close the gap, making dinner, leaving notes, reminding me of anniversaries. Yet every gesture felt hollow, like paint over a cracked wall. The foundation beneath us was too fractured to hold. Claire was gone entirely. No texts, no calls, no quiet laughter slipping through the phone at midnight. She had vanished as though we had never existed to each other at all. Strangely, her absence cut deeper than I expected. The wound of betrayal was sharp, but the void of her silence was a slow ache that lingered. I often asked myself where it all began. Was it the moment Mark first looked at her differently? Was it the moment I chose to ignore the distance growing in my own marriage? Or was it something even smaller, like a door left unlocked, an oversight that became a turning point? The answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I chose to do next. For the first time in years, I began to sit with myself. Not as a wife, not as a friend, not as a role tethered to someone else's expectations, but simply as Anna. I wrote in journals. I walked for hours. I let the silence around me become less of a burden and more of a companion. The pain did not vanish. Some days it swelled like a tide, knocking me off balance without warning. Other days it ebbed, leaving me with space to breathe. Healing, I discovered, was not about erasing the past, but about learning to live without letting it consume me. Mark asked, more than once, if we could try again. His eyes searched mine with desperation, but I no longer saw a future reflected there. I didn't answer him right away. Some questions deserve more than instinct. Yet deep down, I knew the truth. I could not return to what we had, because what we had was never truly whole. And so, I made a quiet promise to myself, to stop living in the shadows of betrayal, to stop waiting for someone else to define my worth. The unlocked door had revealed a secret I never wanted to face, but in its cruel unveiling it had also opened another, an invitation to begin again, not with Mark, not with Claire, but with myself. And perhaps, I thought as I closed my journal one evening, that was the only door that truly mattered.